play to Bell. And Bell hammers down to Ramon Johnson, the tight end here.
The drama of Darryl Henley is finally revealed, and what you're about to hear will shake you. A celebrated NFL cornerback, a role model, an anti-drug spokesman, then drug trafficking, attempted murder, and a 41-year prison sentence. This is the story of how a hometown hero became a cautionary tale of hubris, desperation, and a justice system that failed at every level. But how does someone go from intercepting passes in front of thousands of fans to plotting murder from behind bars? What secret decisions destroyed everything he built? And why does his story reveal something deeply broken about the system itself? Let's go back to where it all started. Darryl Henley was born on October 30th, 1966 in Los Angeles. He wasn't just good at football, he was exceptional. At UCLA, he became a consensus All-American in 1988, one of the best college cornerbacks in the country. The Los Angeles Rams saw his potential and drafted him in the second round in 1989, the 53rd pick overall. For a kid from LA, this was the dream, playing for his hometown team, making it to the NFL. Between 1989 and 1994, Henley played in 76 games. He recorded 12 interceptions. Despite being smaller than most cornerbacks, he was considered one of the best in the league. But it wasn't just his athletic ability that defined him. Henley built a reputation off the field too. He was seen as a role model teammate. He spoke out against drugs. He represented everything a professional athlete should be. The irony of what came next makes his fall even more devastating. In 1993, everything changed. Henley reconnected with a boyhood friend, someone he knew growing up. But this friend wasn't a success story. He had become a drug dealer. And instead of walking away, Henley made a decision that would destroy his life. He agreed to finance a cocaine trafficking operation. Not a small-time deal. We're talking about 12 kilograms of cocaine being moved across state lines, from Southern California to Memphis and Atlanta. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was a calculated choice by someone who had everything. A professional athlete earning substantial money, a public figure with a platform, a man who had literally spoken out against the very thing he was now financing. What makes someone cross that line? Was it greed? Was it the thrill? Or was it the dangerous belief that his celebrity status would somehow shield him from consequences? The truth is, his fame made him a bigger target. Law enforcement agencies were looking for high-profile cases, cases that would make headlines, cases that would advance careers, and Darryl Henley walked straight into their crosshairs. The operation he financed wasn't sophisticated. It was reckless, using a Rams cheerleader as a courier, involving his own uncle in the conspiracy, moving massive quantities of cocaine across multiple states. Every decision increased the risk. Every person involved became another potential witness, and when the walls started closing in, there was nowhere to hide. Think about that for a second. Do you think someone in Henley's position, with everything to lose, truly understood the risk he was taking? Or did he believe his fame would protect him? Drop a comment below with your thoughts. Henley wasn't just involved, he was the money behind the operation. He received cocaine from a man named Rafael Bustamante. Co-conspirators like Willie McGowan and Gary West helped distribute it. Even Henley's own uncle, Rex Henley, was involved, helping prepare and hide the drugs for transport. But the network relied on couriers to move the product, and one of those couriers was someone Henley was romantically involved with. Her name was Tracy Donahoe. She was a Rams cheerleader. Donahoe transported cocaine for Henley until July 15th, 1993. That's the day the entire operation collapsed. DEA agents arrested her at the Atlanta International Airport. They found 12 kilograms of cocaine hidden in her luggage. The game was over. Donahoe immediately agreed to cooperate with federal investigators. She became the key witness against Henley. The woman he trusted to carry drugs across the country was now the person who would testify against him in court. The betrayal must have hit Henley hard. This wasn't just any witness. This was someone he had a relationship with, someone he trusted with his freedom. And now she was sitting across from prosecutors, telling them everything about the flights, about the money, about how the entire operation worked. Her testimony would become the foundation of the government's case. Without her cooperation, the prosecution would have struggled to connect all the pieces. But with Donahoe as their star witness, they had everything they needed. The trial began in January 1995. It lasted 10 weeks. But this wasn't just any trial. It was happening at the same time as another massive case about 20 miles away, the O.J. Simpson murder trial. The timing created a perfect storm of pressure. One of Henley's defense attorneys was juggling his duties while also working as a legal analyst for CNN's coverage of the Simpson case. The media was everywhere. The public was watching. The real problem was the political pressure. The Los Angeles District Attorney's Office was under intense scrutiny because of perceived mistakes in the Simpson trial. Prosecutors handling the Henley case felt the heat. They needed a high-profile conviction. Racial tensions were high. An affluent black athlete from Los Angeles, a young white woman from the suburbs, the optics were explosive, and the prosecution was determined to win. The atmosphere in the courtroom was charged. Every day brought new revelations. Every witness added another layer to the story. The prosecution painted Henley as a calculating drug kingpin who used his fame and connections to build a criminal empire. The defense tried to argue that Henley had made mistakes, but wasn't the mastermind the government claimed. But the evidence was damning. The testimony was clear, and the jury was paying attention. In March 1995, Henley was found guilty. The mandatory minimum sentence for his crime was 10 years in federal prison. A long sentence, but not a life sentence. He could serve his time and eventually get out. But Henley didn't accept his fate. Instead, he made a series of decisions that would turn 10 years into 41. After his conviction, Henley was held at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Los Angeles, awaiting sentencing. He was desperate. He needed money to keep fighting his case, so he bribed a prison guard to smuggle a cellular phone into his cell every night. With that phone, he planned his next move, a $1 million heroin shipment from Los Angeles to Detroit. If he could pull it off, he'd have the money he needed. A jailhouse informant connected Henley with a potential supplier, a man who called himself Joey Gambino. Henley had never met this man before, but he was willing to take the risk. He discussed the heroin deal over the phone, believing he was talking to a mobster who could help him. But Joey Gambino wasn't a mobster. He was an undercover DEA agent named Mike Bansmer, and he was recording every single conversation. This is where the story takes a darker turn, because what happened next wasn't just Henley making bad decisions. The DEA was actively creating the crime. Agent Bansmer didn't just offer to supply heroin, he escalated the situation. During their conversations, he offered Henley something else. 2 hits, 2 contract killings. In exchange for a cut of the heroin profits, Bansmer said he could make 2 people disappear. Henley accepted. The targets were the 2 people who had destroyed his life. Judge Gary L. Taylor, the judge who presided over his drug trial, and Tracy Donahoe, his ex-girlfriend, and the star witness who testified against him. Henley agreed to have them murdered. The conversations were recorded. The evidence was overwhelming, and the DEA had their case. But here's the question. Did the DEA catch Henley plotting murder, or did they create the plot themselves? The jailhouse informant who introduced Henley to the fake mobster was released from prison the same day Henley was charged. The agent offered the hits, not Henley. The entire scheme was manufactured by the government. They gave him the opportunity, the structure, and the suggestion, and Henley, desperate and reckless, walked right into the trap. The recordings tell a story of manipulation. Agent Bansmer knew exactly what buttons to push. He understood that Henley was angry, desperate, and looking for revenge. So he offered a solution. A way to eliminate the problems, a way to make the witnesses disappear, and Henley, blinded by rage and desperation, agreed. The tapes would later be played in court, sealing his fate forever. In 1997, faced with tape-recorded evidence of soliciting murder, Henley pleaded guilty. The combined charges of drug trafficking, heroin conspiracy, and attempted murder resulted in a sentence of 41 years. That's 495 months in federal prison, no possibility of parole. The judge confirmed the severity of the sentence, asking Henley if he understood that 495 months was something like 42 years. Henley understood, but by then it was too late. The courtroom was silent when the sentence was read. 41 years. For a man who was 31 years old at the time, this meant he wouldn't walk free until he was in his 70s. His NFL career was a distant memory. His reputation was destroyed. His future was gone. The judge's words echoed through the room, a final punctuation mark on a tragedy that could have been avoided at so many different points along the way. The 41-year sentence wasn't just about the crimes Henley committed. It was the result of systemic failures at every level. First, the mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines of the war on drugs era. These policies, enacted in the 1980s and 1990s, ensured that even first-time drug offenders received lengthy federal sentences. No room for nuance, no consideration of circumstances, just harsh, unforgiving punishment. These laws were designed to target kingpins and major traffickers, but they caught everyone in their net. People like Henley, who made terrible decisions but weren't career criminals, faced the same sentences as hardened drug lords. The system didn't differentiate. It didn't care about context. It simply applied the mandatory minimums and locked people away for decades. Years later, even judges who sentenced people under these guidelines would speak out about how unjust they were. But by then, thousands of people were already serving those sentences. Second, the entrapment question. The DEA didn't just catch Henley. They created the conditions for the most serious crime. They offered the heroin deal. They suggested the murders. They recorded the conversations, and they used those recordings to multiply his sentence. Critics have argued that this was government overreach, a career-enhancing case for the agents involved, a way to secure a high-profile conviction by manufacturing the crime. The debate over entrapment in cases like this continues today. Where is the line between catching criminals and creating them? When does aggressive law enforcement cross into manufacturing crime? These questions matter because they affect real lives. And in Henley's case, they affected the difference between a 10-year sentence and a 41-year sentence. The difference between middle-age freedom and dying behind bars. Third, and perhaps most disturbing, was the juror misconduct in Henley's original 1995 drug trial. Years after his conviction, investigations revealed shocking details. One juror used racial slurs during deliberations, referring to the defendants with the N-word and predicting they were going to hang. Another juror used methamphetamine throughout the trial. A third juror tried to solicit a $25,000 bribe from Henley. In 2001, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals reviewed the case and confirmed that Henley's Sixth Amendment rights had been violated. The court stated that even the bias or prejudice of a single juror violates the Constitution. The foundation of Henley's initial conviction was tainted, legally unsound, constitutionally invalid. But here's the cruelest twist. By the time the court made this ruling, Henley couldn't benefit from it. Why? Because his 1997 plea deal required him to waive his right to appeal the original conviction. He was locked into the 41-year sentence forever. The legal system acknowledged the injustice in a quiet way. The charges against Henley's co-defendants quietly went away. They were released years later, but Darryl Henley stayed behind bars. The system showed zero tolerance for his attempt to corrupt the process by plotting murder. But when it came to the internal corruption, the racist juror, the meth-using juror, the bribe-soliciting juror, the system found a way to sidestep accountability. The plea deal sealed the outcome. The 41 years stood. Henley was born in 1966. Based on his sentence starting in 1997, he won't be eligible for release until he's around 61 years old. That means he spent over half his life in prison for a crime that began with a bad decision to reconnect with an old friend, for a murder plot that the government helped create, for a conviction built on a trial tainted by racial bias. The tragedy isn't just what Henley did, it's what the system did to him in return. But even in the darkest stories, there's something to learn. Henley has spent decades reflecting on his mistakes and the system that locked him away. He's become what some call an involuntary expert on the criminal justice system. He's spoken about the need for true reform, about how mandatory minimums destroy lives, about how the war on drugs created a generation of people serving disproportionate sentences, about how the system needs to change so that others don't suffer the same fate. His story is a reminder that justice isn't always just, that the people enforcing the law can sometimes break it, that a single bad decision can cost you everything. But it's also a reminder that even when someone makes terrible choices, the punishment should fit the crime, not be manufactured, escalated, and sealed by a system more interested in securing convictions than seeking truth. Darryl Henley will spend most of his life in prison. He made mistakes that can't be undone, but his story forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about entrapment, about mandatory minimums, about racial bias in the courtroom, about whether a justice system that fails to protect constitutional rights can ever truly deliver justice. If you found this story as compelling and tragic as we did, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. What do you think about the DEA's role in escalating Henley's crimes? Do you believe the 41-year sentence was justified, or was it excessive? Let us know your thoughts. And if you want more stories that reveal the truth behind the headlines, make sure to like this video and stay tuned for what's coming next.